Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantools, and I know the video title may sound confusing, but there is a reason for it being worded that way. So I'll explain what the situation is, and you'll understand what I mean by an Eastern Catholic who attacks Eastern Catholic traditions. So this relates to an argument a friend of mine had in a Facebook group. And by the way, this is the same guy who argued with a Jehovah's Witness for 5 weeks. So this friend of mine, he's definitely getting a lot of experience in the apologetics department. And the group in question is run by radtrans. My friend isn't a radtrad himself, but sometimes he goes to a number of groups, that preach different things to Catholic theology, or the groups that condemn Catholicism in some manner, just so he can see their arguments, see how strong they are, and what he should research to counter them. And in this group, someone shared a post which had an image in it from a page of the Fatima Crusader about how communion on the tongue is apparently an apostolic tradition. But if you actually read this image, you can see it's not talking about communion on the tongue being an apostolic tradition. It's meant to be an attack on communion in the hand. And I've actually refuted this post before, several months ago. I think I broke it into I broke it into five posts, but I divided up the 10 references or quotes in it, and then I refuted every one of them, talking about how either they're A, completely falsified references and quotes, or B, they're taken out of context. For instance, the quote by Pope Saint Sixtus I, he says, "The sacred vessels are not to be handled by others than those consecrated to the Lord." The thing is, anyone with a pair of eyes and a functioning brain, when they look over those words, will see it's talking about the sacred vessels and not communion or the Eucharist. And if you look at the Council of Saragossa, which apparently excommunicated anyone who dared continue receiving Holy Communion by the hand. This was confirmed by the Synod of Toledo. I think I looked up. Yeah, I think Toledo is the one I'm thinking about now. The Council of Saragossa actually has no reference to communion in the hand. It was a relatively short synod in which its main concern was Arianism, and it produced 3 canons. Not one of them dealt with communion. Not one of them dealt with communion in the hand. And I don't think the Synod of Toledo dealt with communion in the hand either. So, as I said before, I've already dealt with all of these references. I divided them up into 5 posts, and I dealt with them individually. And the radtrans did not like my post when I made them, but they couldn't really put forward a case other than accuse me of modernism, which wouldn't really stand up in an ecclesial court. But I expect nothing better from a bunch of slanderers like them. Anyway, the main thing about this video. What happened was my friend, he doesn't really get involved in arguments in this radtrad group because he knows he'll probably be blocked. But he decided to get involved slightly and just scrolling down, without getting too close to the camera here. Yeah, he brings up the fact that a lot of these references are taken out of context, and that it's important to actually do your research about every one of these references before you automatically believe it. You shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet. And this woman who calls herself, and I'm going to say the name because it's a page, she calls herself Música Católica, and apparently she's meant to share Spanish Celtic music. It's weird. She says a lot of her arguments were that she was apparently an Eastern Catholic herself, or her family was Eastern Catholic for hundreds of years, and she now goes to both the Western Rite Mass, or Latin Rite, or the Latin Mass, and Eastern Divine Liturgies as well. So I'm not sure if it's like a bi-weekly basis or something, but she basically goes to both types of Mass. But the main point she was trying to get across is that before the 1st century AD, obviously, had ended, the Eastern churches had apparently stopped communion in the hand because apparently it was leading to abuses or something like that. But when my friend pressed her for more information, she refused to give it to him. And my friend does give evidence that communion in the hand wasn't stopped in the 1st century AD, so referencing church fathers like Saints Narse and Cyril of Jerusalem, and the Chaldean Rite hymn, which talks about receiving communion in the hand. It's a very old hymn, and the Chaldeans themselves, and I think the Maronites as well, they both believe that communion in the hand is an apostolic tradition. However, this woman, Musica Cattolica, she doesn't want to present any information for her beliefs. When my friend puts up a bit of a fight against her, saying, I'm not going to straight out believe you, I need evidence for what you claim. She then tries to deflect this and say, you should be doing your own research on this. For instance, here's one comment she says, my family has been Eastern Rite for hundreds of years. I attend both. I find it hard to believe you find nothing. Dig deeper and pray for truth. She also says in another comment, do the research. Like you said, others need to do in your previous post. It's hard to believe you can't find what everyone else does. Reluctance, demons blinding you, not wanting to believe it's true, who knows? Despite my friend countering these comments, she very quickly doesn't answer them anymore. But he does point out that these are merely deflection tactics and attempts to launch ad hominems against him, because she doesn't really have much of a case against him if she's not going to give any evidence. And I think my friend's experience with the Jehovah's Witness a couple of months ago actually helps him here, because he's become a lot better at identifying when people are very short on evidence and try to deflect away from that. So let me tell you this right now. If you're ever arguing with anyone and they tell you to do the research yourselves for evidence against your case, or for any contradictory evidence that apparently counters you, know that they've lost. For instance, when my friend was arguing with that Jehovah's Witness, the Jehovah's Witness would tell my friend to do the research about something, or to do the research against Catholicism to refute it. But he wouldn't give any specific things to look up. The field of anti-Catholicism is quite large, and the Jehovah's Witness wouldn't necessarily agree with everything that anti-Catholics believed, because you'd have something like Lutheran anti-Catholics, East Orthodox anti-Catholics, and other stuff like that. But the Jehovah's Witness didn't have much evidence against the onslaught that my friend was bringing to the table against the Jehovah's Witness cult. So, by trying to use deflection, he was trying to make it look like my friend was the one who was falling short of doing the necessary research. Except that the burden of proof was actually on the Jehovah's Witness. He was the one who wasn't bringing enough evidence to the table to counter what my friend was doing, or what my friend was bringing to the table himself. And similar to this woman here, my friend was giving plenty of evidence from the church fathers. He was referencing the church fathers themselves. He was more than prepared to give further evidence and links and sources to this woman if she asked. But instead of providing evidence for her case, she just tells him to dig deep and you'll find the truth. If you can't bring forward evidence for your case, then it's probably better to not get involved in arguments at all. All you'll end up doing is just embarrassing yourself and those who believe the same case as you, whether they have evidence or not. Because not all representatives of an ideology will necessarily be perfect debaters or have a full library of evidence in their mind. Fair enough. Not all Catholics are going to be well versed in the faith. But if you're going to get involved in an argument, or if there's a case and you want to say something against it, you should at least have evidence at the ready to put forward in your framework of interpretation, so you can give not just a refutation of the other case, but also an explanation of your case and why it makes better use of the available evidence. This woman here, at most, she was probably relying on the admin of this group to delete my friend's comments and block him from the group. Or perhaps she was just going to, close her eyes and pretend he didn't exist, and that's why she didn't counter any of his larger comments. But looking at her works, I don't really see her as much of an Eastern Catholic. My friend even asks her what rite she's from, but she doesn't mention which one. And you can't just say you're from an Eastern rite, because I think there's 22 Eastern. No, keep getting the numbers wrong. I think there's 23 Eastern churches divided between 6 main rites. And this woman, as far as I can tell, I think she's American, probably maybe with some Spanish roots. But I didn't see any evidence of her when doing research about her that she was Eastern Catholic in any way. So maybe she just attends a Byzantine mass or something. But even then, the Byzantines receive communion on the tongue, but standing up, because they associate kneeling with penitential prayer. It's not surprising that my friend runs into such an individual in the Rad Trad groups. I've seen plenty of them myself, and I'm sure I'm going to make a lot more videos about Rad Trads in future, and I'm definitely sure that they're going to hate me for that and accuse me of modernism. Which is a bit ridiculous, because I make plenty of posts on my Facebook page about the lay Pope, and I'm refuting him a lot, including a lot of his aggressive posts towards Bishop Snyder and against the Latin Mass, which at one point he compares to mustard gas. But that's Rad Tradism or Restorationism for you. They only do half the research, and they're not really traditional at all. They are only traditional up to a point. But I feel that I'm going to get off topic very quickly on this video. So the main points about this video is you shouldn't trust everything you read on the internet without looking at its references and sources to authenticate it. And B, you can claim to be from something all you want. If you don't correctly describe the beliefs of what you claim to be from, then that's going to severely undermine the whatever perspective or information you give about it from your anecdotal evidence, really. You can claim to be Eastern Rite, but if you condemn Eastern Rite practices and traditions that are almost 2,000 years old, you may not exactly be much of an Eastern Catholic yourself. That is, if she's even telling the truth. That is, if she's even telling the truth in this video. For all we know, she just goes to a mass in Spanish, and because Spain is really close to the Eastern Hemisphere border, that's what she considers Eastern. I don't know, but I need to end this video and get on with my other stuff. Otherwise, just do your research, please, everyone. Otherwise, have a good weekend, all of you. God bless you all. See you in the next video, comrades. Until then.